It all starts here, thought and motion. One comes from mindset, the other from skill set. We all start small, then we separate from the crowd, and creativity transforms into income. Learn, apply, improve, grow, build something that lasts.
Hey designers! In this video, we're going to create a voice-synced concept animation. So let's get started. Begin by creating a new composition, then create a new solid layer. Once that's done, go to Effects and Presets and search for Grid. Apply the grid effect to your solid layer, and then change the blending mode from normal to multiply. Adjust the grid color so it's clearly visible. Next, in the grid settings, change the size option from corner to width slider. I personally like it this way, but feel free to adjust the width according to your own preference. Now, import the brain PNG. I've used images downloaded from different websites, so you can choose any brain image that works for you. They're not too rare, so you'll easily find something similar. Drag and drop the brain image onto your timeline, then scale it down a bit. Go to Effects and Presets again and search for Wiggle. Select Wiggle Position and apply it to the brain layer. You'll notice the brain starts to move. Let's adjust the movement by decreasing the wiggle amount. We want a subtle motion, nothing too dramatic. Reduce it to around 15. That looks much better and gives it a nice subtle floating effect. Now select the brain PNG layer, press S to bring up the scale, and Shift plus T to bring up the opacity. Click on the stopwatch next to both scale and opacity to create your first keyframes. Move the timeline indicator forward by a few frames and add another set of keyframes there. Go back to the first frame and set the scale to 0 and opacity to 0. This will create a smooth entrance animation. Select both sets of keyframes, press F9 to easy ease them. Then open the graph editor and adjust the handles to create a smooth curve just like this. Perfect. Now come back to the main timeline and move the indicator forward again, around the 10th frame, where the brain reaches its original size and opacity. At this point, create a new shape layer and draw a simple circle. Duplicate this circle by pressing Ctrl plus D on your keyboard. Move the duplicated circle to one side and give it a color of your choice. For this animation, we'll be using two colors. 3 balls will be orange and 3 will be purple. So go ahead and duplicate the orange and purple circles 2 more times each, and then adjust their positions around the brain. To keep the timeline neat and organized, we'll start by duplicating the orange circle and renaming the one in the center to Orange Main. That central one will serve as the base. Do the same with the purple circle. Rename the center one as Purple Main. Now, duplicate the orange circle twice and adjust their positions. Repeat this with the purple one. Rename it, duplicate it twice, and position the duplicates properly. This renaming is just for better organization later on, because there will be several layers, and this will help you quickly identify which one you're working on. Move the timeline indicator around 10 frames ahead, then select all the ball layers and press P to reveal their position property. Click on the stopwatch to create position keyframes for all of them. Now move the indicator back to the 10th frame and bring all the balls to the center, one by one. Do this individually so they animate properly. When you preview, you'll see all the balls start from the center and then spread out to their positions. Select all these layers, press F9 to easy ease the keyframes, then go into the graph editor and adjust the curves for smoother motion. Perfect. With all the ball layers still selected, apply the wiggle position effect on them as well. Adjust the wiggle amount and frequency as per your liking. Now they'll have a nice subtle movement. Next, press U twice to bring up all the keyframes in the timeline. Before continuing, let's lock the background layer so it doesn't move accidentally. Finally, move the brain PNG layer to the top so the balls stay hidden behind it at the beginning. Looks great. Now select all the ball PNG layers and trim them where their first keyframes are by pressing Alt plus left square bracket so they don't appear before the brain animation begins. Decide if you want a slight gap after the brain shows up. A short pause helps the animation feel more natural. So select all the ball layers and move them forward on the timeline to create that gap. That looks better. If the ball movement feels too fast, just select both keyframes for each ball and move the second keyframe slightly forward to slow it down. Now, decide the point where the balls will move out of the frame. At that point, select the brain PNG layer and click the stopwatch next to opacity. Move the timeline a few frames ahead and reduce the opacity to 0% so it fades out. Then select all the ball PNG layers again. Press U to reveal their position keyframes, and add another blank keyframe 2 or 3 frames after the last one. Move the timeline ahead by a few more frames, and then individually move all the purple balls to the top center and all the orange balls to the bottom center. Now the purple balls move upward and the orange ones downward, just the way we want. Next, we'll scale up the main balls. Select both orange main and purple main, then press Shift plus S to open the scale property. Click the stopwatch to create keyframes, then go back in the timeline and decide where the scale-up should begin. Add a blank keyframe at that point, then move forward a couple of frames and increase the scale value to make them pop visually. Adjust the positioning of the layers if needed, and preview your animation to see how it's looking. Check if it's moving too fast or too slow. Adjust the keyframes accordingly. It's totally up to you how you want the motion to feel. Once you're satisfied, select both of the scale keyframes of the main balls and press F9 to easy ease them. Now press U twice to collapse everything and keep your timeline clean. Next, take the text tool and type skill set. Give it a color of your choice and adjust the font and size as needed. Duplicate this text layer by pressing Ctrl+D. Move the duplicated text downward and change the text to say Mindset. These two text layers should appear right after the main balls have scaled up, so go to that point on the timeline, select both text layers, and press Alt plus left bracket to trim them so they start there. Now go to the brain PNG, open its effects, and select both the wiggle position and transform effects. Press Ctrl+C to copy them. Then select both text layers and press Ctrl+V to paste the same wiggle effect onto them. Adjust their timing on the timeline so they appear exactly where you want them. Press T to bring up the opacity for both text layers, move the timeline a few frames forward, and add a blank keyframe there. Go back to the first opacity keyframe and set its value to 0%. The text now appears with a subtle movement, matching the visual rhythm of the animation. Now, preview the animation to make sure everything is flowing well. Once you're happy, select both text layers, go to the point where the text is visible, and add a blank opacity keyframe. Then move the timeline indicator a few frames forward and reduce the opacity to 0. This way, the text will fade out just like it faded in. Now let's animate the exit of the orange main and purple main balls. Go to the same point where the text starts to fade out, select both of these ball layers, and add blank keyframes on both scale and position by clicking the stopwatches. Move the timeline indicator a few frames forward and add another set of blank keyframes. Then move it even further forward. And here we'll scale the balls up significantly, make them much bigger. At the same time, move the orange ball downward and the purple ball upward, separately. Once that animation is set, let's clean up. Select all the other orange and purple ball layers, excluding the main ones. Move the timeline indicator to the point where the main balls have fully scaled up, and press Alt plus right square bracket to trim those extra layers so they disappear at that point. This helps keep the timeline neat and ensures nothing lingers on screen unnecessarily. Once you've done all the necessary adjustments to the scaling, position, and timing, it's time to import the profile icon. Drag and drop the profile image into the timeline and adjust its scale if needed to make it fit nicely. Now, find the point in the timeline where the orange main ball is at the bottom and the purple main ball is at the top. At that moment, trim the profile icon layer so it starts exactly from there. Select the layer, press T to bring up opacity, click the stopwatch to add a keyframe, then move the timeline indicator a few frames forward and add another keyframe. Go back to the first opacity keyframe and set its value to 0%, so the profile icon fades in smoothly. Next, duplicate this profile icon by pressing Ctrl+D and move the duplicate slightly to the right. Duplicate again and move the third one further right, aligning them side by side. Adjust the positioning so they're spaced evenly and remain centered as a group. Now duplicate the third one again, move it down to start forming a second row, then duplicate that and move it to the right as well. You should now have a total of 5 profile icons arranged in a grid. To make the animation feel more natural, we'll offset their appearance slightly. That means they won't all pop up at once. So, select the second profile layer and move it forward 5 frames. You can use the shortcut control plus right arrow to move forward 1 frame at a time. Repeat this process with the third, fourth, and fifth profile layers. Each one offset 5 frames after the last. This creates a smooth, staggered animation that looks much better than all appearing at once. After all that's done, let's clean up the timeline a bit by trimming unnecessary layers so they don't clutter the workspace. Press U to reveal all keyframes, and let's start by trimming the small ball layers at the point where the main balls have fully scaled up. Do the same with the mindset and skill set text layers. Trim them at that same point so they exit cleanly. Now select all the profile layers and move them forward in the timeline so they appear right after the text fades out. It's a good habit to trim layers after each step to avoid confusion or overlapping later on. Once the positioning is done, preview your animation to see how everything looks so far. Now press U twice to collapse everything and keep your timeline clean. Next, we'll add text on top of the orange ball. Use the text tool to type in your text and then adjust the font, size, color, and paragraph spacing as needed to match your design. Once you're happy with the look, decide exactly where this text should appear. I think this spot feels right. Then go to Effects and Presets and search for Slow Fade On, and apply it to the text layer. Press U to view the keyframes and move the second keyframe closer to the first one so the fade happens a bit faster. Adjust the position of these keyframes so the animation timing feels just right. Make sure the font style also complements the rest of the layout. After the text stays on screen for a while, press T to bring up opacity, click the stopwatch to add a keyframe, move the timeline forward a few frames, and reduce the opacity to 0 so it fades out. At the same time this bottom text fades out, a new text will appear on top. Use the text tool again and write the new top text, then customize the font, color, and size to fit the design. Apply the same slow fade on effect to this top text layer, press U to view keyframes, and again move the second keyframe closer to speed up the fade in. Let it stay visible for a few seconds, and then fade it out with the same opacity animation technique we used earlier. Now, when the top text is moving, that's the point where the profile icons will also start to move out of the screen using a basic position animation. So first, select all the profile icons except the one in the center. Press P to reveal the position property, then click on the stopwatch to create the first set of keyframes. Move the timeline forward by a few frames and then individually move each of these profiles off screen in different directions. You can move some up, some sideways, depending on the layout, just enough to animate them out naturally. Now for the center profile, we'll animate it slightly differently. It won't be moving out. Instead, it will move into the center of the screen. Press P to reveal its position and click the stopwatch to set a keyframe at its original spot. At the point where all other profiles have left the screen, adjust this center profile's position so it's perfectly centered. Then press Shift plus S to bring up scale, click the stopwatch to add a keyframe at that position, go back a few frames and add a blank keyframe, then move forward a couple frames and scale it up a bit to make it more prominent. Adjust the final position and scale until it looks well balanced. That looks really good. At this point, the top text should also fade out, so go ahead and select its opacity keyframes and adjust their position on the timeline so the text fades out right as the center profile moves into place. Now, it's time to animate the orange and purple balls out of the frame as well. Select both of these ball layers and press U to reveal their existing keyframes. Then press Shift plus T to bring up opacity. Click on the stopwatch next to opacity to create a keyframe where they're fully visible. Then move the timeline forward a few frames, reduce their opacity to 0, and at the same time, move the orange ball downward and the purple ball upward, so they animate out in opposite directions. Preview the animation to make sure everything flows smoothly. Now, while the balls are moving out and the text is fading away, we're going to bring in the dollar icon. Import the dollar PNG. Drag and drop it onto the timeline, and it should appear on top of everything. Adjust its scale if needed, and position it where it fits best visually in the composition. Select the dollar icon layer, click on the stopwatch next to opacity, and set the value to 0 so it starts fully transparent. Then move the timeline indicator a few frames forward, and set the opacity to 100%. This way, the dollar icon fades in smoothly. Now duplicate this dollar layer twice by pressing Ctrl plus D 2 times. Select all three dollar layers and press Alt plus left square bracket to trim them from the current point so they don't show before this. Now let's create a staggered appearance by offsetting the layers. First, the dollar on the right will appear, then the center, and then the left one. Move one duplicate into the center position and the other to the right. You can now start arranging their appearance. Space them a few frames apart so they appear one after another in the right order, creating a nice popping sequence. Let's first give the dollar icons a bit of motion using Wiggle. Select the brain PNG, go to its effects, select both Wiggle Position and Transform, and press Ctrl plus C to copy them. Then select all the dollar layers and press Ctrl plus V to paste the same wiggle effects onto them. If needed, increase the wiggle amount slightly to make the motion more noticeable, and adjust the wiggle speed to your liking. Preview the animation. Looking good. Now it's time to animate the dollar icons out of the frame. Decide the point where that should happen, then press P to bring up the position property for each dollar layer. Click the stopwatch to add a keyframe on each one, then move the bar indicator a few frames earlier and add blank keyframes. Now move the timeline to the last frame of their appearance and individually move the left icon out to the left, the center one down, and the right icon off to the right so they all exit in different directions. Preview that motion. Perfect. At this same point, the profile icon should also fade out. So select the profile layer, click the opacity stopwatch to add a keyframe at that moment, Then move the timeline a few frames forward and set the opacity to 0 so it fades out smoothly as the dollars disappear. Let's clean up the timeline first to stay organized. Now, at the point where everything has moved out of the screen, we'll add a new text section. Use the text tool and type in the 4 points. Learn, apply, improve, and grow. Adjust the font, paragraph spacing, size, and other settings to match your style and composition. Once you're happy with the layout, go to the point in the timeline where the text should appear and apply the slow fade-on animation to it. Then press U to reveal the keyframes and move the second keyframe closer to the first one to speed up the fade-in. Select both keyframes and press F9 to easy ease them for smoother motion. Now, after these 4 text points appear, we'll animate a ball moving between them. First to learn, then apply, improve, and finally grow. To create the ball, make sure no layer is selected, then grab the ellipse tool and draw a circle shape anywhere on the screen. Adjust the color and fill of this shape. I'm going with an orange color here for consistency, but you can pick whatever fits your design. Now select Shape Layer 1. Press P to bring up the position property, and also press Shift plus T to reveal opacity. Move the circle over to the first text. Click on the stopwatch next to both position and opacity to create keyframes. Then move the timeline indicator a few frames forward and shift the ball down so it aligns with the second word, apply. Move forward again and position the ball on the third word, improve. Then repeat once more by moving a few frames ahead and placing the ball on the last word, grow. Move the bar indicator a few frames back from this opacity keyframe. Set the opacity to 0. This way, when it reaches the second keyframe, the opacity will smoothly go from 0 to 100. Right now, the opacity animation feels too fast, so drag the first keyframe a little to the left to slow it down. Next, select all the position keyframes and press F9 to apply Easy Ease. Then open the graph editor and adjust the speed graph as shown to get a smoother animation. If you feel the animation is too fast, select all the position keyframes and move the last keyframe further to the right to slow down the entire motion. This will create a smoother and more readable transition between each point, keeping the pacing nice and clean. Alright, now it's time to move both the shape layer and the text layer off the screen. Select both layers and press T to bring up opacity. For the shape layer, add a blank keyframe, and for the text layer, click on the stopwatch next to opacity to start the animation. Then move the bar indicator forward a few frames and set both opacities to 0 so they fade out together. If you want this transition to feel quicker or more gradual, adjust the keyframe spacing accordingly. Once that's done, select the keyframes and press F9 to easy ease them. Then go into the graph editor and tweak the curve to smooth things out just the way you like it. Now for the final step, adding the build icon to wrap things up. Drag and drop the icon onto the timeline and adjust its scale so it fits well on screen. Go to Effects and Presets and search for Block Dissolve, then apply it to the icon layer. Press U to reveal the keyframes and move the second keyframe closer to the first one so the dissolve animation happens faster. To make it feel more dynamic, also apply wiggle position to the layer. Give everything a final preview, and that's it. Your animation is complete. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, make sure to like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Ace Designs for more tutorials like this.
It all starts here, thought and motion. One comes from mindset, the other from skill set. We all start small, then we separate from the crowd, and creativity transforms into income. Learn, apply, improve, grow, build something that lasts.